words and language are so harmful in our world, in the world that we work in, and when you don't have specialists in journalism or in media and they write something, the impact that that story could have on a survivor coming forward or someone helping someone else could be huge.
Hi, welcome to our podcast. I'm joined by Lou and Karen today, so I'll just ask you to just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself, and the organisations that you're involved in.
I'm Karen Jardine. I am the Campaigns and Communications Manager at Nottinghamshire Sexual Violence Support Services. So we provide support to survivors of sexual violence aged 18 and above.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Louise Graham, but you can call me Lou. I'm the Sexual Violence and Violence Against Women and Girls Lead at the Nottingham Community Safety Partnership, and I also manage the Nottingham Consent Coalition.
Brilliant. So tell us a little bit about the Consent Coalition. What is it? How did it come about?
So the Consent Coalition is a partnership brand and platform and a way of specialists communicating with everybody about the resources, the campaigns that we produce on consent and sexual violence. So a little bit about the history. In Nottingham we have a group called the Sexual Violence Action Network. We abbreviate it to SVAG because it's a little bit easier to say, and in that group are specialists from the sexual violence and violence against women and girls sector, and it consists of partners including NOTS-SVSS, Equation, Imara, our health services, both big universities, local authorities, the CPS, the police and the RPCC, and loads of partners. There's around 20 of us in that group, and our aim is to focus on particularly prevention, education and awareness raising. And the SVAN is the doing bit, and the bits that we produce as projects and resources, we then share them under the partnership name of the Consent Coalition. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, because it values everybody's contribution in creating our resources and our designs. And two, it provides less confusion for people to find, rather than going to individual organisations. They can just come to one place and find everything that we've created together.
I mean, we'll come on to consent in a short while, but you know, we see issues around sort of sexual harassment and sexual violence. It's, you know, it's in the news, and you know, when whether we're talking about grooming gangs, whether we're talking about online predators, the news has been full of, you know, colourful characters that have suddenly been accused of, you know, historical abuses. What's actually the scope of the problem? How big do you think the issue actually is in terms of sexual violence?
Well, I mean, I think that the strong statement is that the government now have violence against women and girls is one of their targets, is to reduce that by 50% in the next 10 years. It's an epidemic. It is huge. It's part of our day-to-day lives, whether it's online, it's in person, it's whether it's sexual violence, it's sexual harassment, it's, as you mentioned, grooming, it's surrounding the world that we live in, and the way that it's spoken about and it's addressed. Sometimes it can be incredibly unhelpful in the way that it's picked up by the media, the press, and the way that survivors and perpetrators are portrayed. But it's, you know, figures are rising, people are coming forward and reporting, and we need to make sure that we have services and support in place when these figures and people and survivors are wanting to come and seek help and go through the criminal justice process.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from figures that you can find, say, on Rape Crisis England and Wales website, it's 1 in 6 children will experience some kind of childhood sexual abuse. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 18 men will experience rape or sexual assault as an adult or from 16 plus. So when you look at it in those figures, there's probably people within your own circle that you may not know about, they may not have told you, but have probably experienced some kind of sexual harassment, sexual assault, possibly rape, and may or may not have felt like that they can tell anybody about it.
Yeah. And the research also says that most of those people won't tell anyone. So it's often a silent problem, like you've just said. We probably have people in our families, in our social circles that have maybe experienced that, but they've not mentioned it, they've not talked about it, they won't.
Mm-hmm.
And the time it takes, it's a really horrific crime. And it will take someone time to maybe process and understand what has happened to them. And there's so much victim blaming and shame around it. So the reporting coming forward does take a long time. And that's historical crimes, and that's, recent crimes that are in the last 12 months. And so it's not just something has happened, I'm going to report straight away, because realistically that doesn't happen.
Yeah. And, we know from our own statistics and from wider across the UK as well that about 50% of people asking for support from a rape crisis type centre, their experience will have happened over 2 years ago. So they've spent 2 years of coping with that on their own, trying to understand what happened, maybe getting their information from elsewhere. We know it's often shown on soaps and things like that nowadays as well. So it can take a long time for people to come and get support. But then when you also think about from within those figures, some of those people will have gone to ISFA services within sexual assault centre. So, and ISFA services tend to pick up people a lot quicker. People tend to go to them, they've, say, maybe reported to the police or gone to a SARC. So they'll see the average of the people going to there would have probably had an assault much more recently, say within the last week or the last month or 6 months. So then statistically that means that people come in for support later on, say for counselling or something further down the line. It's not just 2 years, it could be 10 years, 20 years. We do get people aged in their 70s coming to us to talk about things because actually now they just feel that the time is right.
Or maybe something they've seen on TV sort of triggers something, and suddenly sort of, that experience that was a long time ago that they've maybe tried hard not to think about is sort of present in their mind, and therefore it's sort of triggered some emotional response.
Absolutely, yeah.
So rape myths sort of out there tell us that, there's certain types of women or women that do certain things that are often victims of sexual assault, but, we know that it's any young woman or girl can be affected, can't it? I mean, from your experience, who is affected by sexual violence?
Predominantly it is a gendered crime more towards women. We know that from the statistics, but men can be survivors themselves. I think some of the myths that are surround it are that, a perpetrator and offender is a stranger, which is not the case. I think that's a really big myth, that it's usually someone that so maybe a partner, ex-partner, a friend or an acquaintance, and that makes it even more difficult because it's, that maybe that trust or that interaction and trying to then explain it, and those myths that are embedded, I think sometimes, in whether it's sort of storylines on TV or headlines and things that women, people project and think, that what we should do to keep ourselves safe. Well, actually, no, it's not about us keeping ourselves safe. It's putting the blame where it should be with perpetrators. And if women want to walk down the street in the dark, we should be able to walk down the street in the dark. We shouldn't have to hold our phones, hold our keys, walk under particular lighting, or not go under bridges. I think hopefully that through some of the preventative work that we're doing and some of the, I think sometimes storylines that are picked up now are trying to put the blame where it needs to be, and that is with the perpetrator. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, when we first developed Stand By Her, that was originally, it was a programme that was mainly targeted at men, because we actually felt, we shouldn't be teaching women or training women on how to deal with men's bad behaviour. We should be stopping that behaviour in the first place. And there was very little that was actually targeted at men. In fact, we mentioned victim blaming. I recently read a book. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a very thick book about victim blaming. And even the raising awareness of the concept was still talking about what women need to do or what women don't need to do. Yeah. Nowhere in that book or nowhere in anything that I've read have I seen any messages to men saying, can you just be thinking about the impact of your behaviour? Can you think about if you're walking behind a woman on a dark street, she may feel concerned, maybe, cross the road or slow down or don't walk. So there's very few messages that men actually get, isn't it, in terms of stopping the behaviour that leads to those crimes.
And stopping that behaviour and also intervening when you see, if you're out with the lads or you're out with your friends and you're, whether it's something that people consider, or maybe it's just a name, or I just approached someone, I just did this because I thought it was funny. But that intervention, and women need allies and need men to be part of that change, that culture shift into we shouldn't just be sticking up for ourselves, but actually, we need you to be part of this journey of culture shift, and into helping each other to intervene when things are not appropriate, when that behaviour and that language is not appropriate, and that's what I think we need to also tap into.
And I think it's really important actually that all people feel empowered to call out behaviour that they feel is wrong, or that they, if say their sister was receiving that kind of unwanted attention, they wouldn't feel comfortable about. So it's actually making people feel like that they can call that behaviour out, or go, hang on a minute, mate, you don't really want to be saying that, or just take a step back, or just just distract them, even just so that actually it gives space for the people to breathe and to actually think, this is what's going on, and we're going to stop it now, that's fine.
And sometimes that's a really strong message when you've got a friend saying, no, that's not okay, mate, or just leave her alone, she's not interested. Those are strong statements. That's like, and for others that are watching by thinking, actually, that's really good. He did that, and that made that person feel less uncomfortable and diffused a situation which could have got quite uncomfortable or harassing. So, that behaviour is really important for us to see, whether it's out on the streets, it's in a bar, it's in a space, it's in a workplace, and that allyship, it needs to get stronger, and hopefully it is getting weaved through the work that we do.
Yeah. And I think, there's an awful lot that we can do, not just as adults out as adults or whatever, but also adults and also parents, or if we've got grandchildren or nieces and nephews, like my youngest is in sixth form now, and he'll come back and he'll say, oh, such and such happened, or this happened, and I'll be like, and what did you do? And what did you feel like? And we'll discuss what happened, or did he diffuse a situation, or how he would act if that kind of thing happened again. And he's quite sensible actually, and will act generally in the best way. But you can get those conversations in at all ages really, and stages of somebody's development really.
And sometimes it's more about raising awareness than having a go and sort of saying that was out of order. Sometimes just letting people know, I had a very good close male friend who said something a couple of months ago. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something that could have been seen as negative and derogatory towards women. And I remember saying to him, hang on a minute, I said, don't say that. And he goes, no, I don't mean it. I said, look, I know you don't mean it in a negative way. I know that because I know you. But if you're saying those things down the pub with people that you don't really know, if you're saying those things, at work with other people that maybe that don't know you as well as I do, they may not appreciate, where you're coming from. And actually they may take that as permission to say derogatory things about women themselves, because they'll perceive that. And then the worrying thing is they may add their own hostility onto it. So, from you, an innocent comment that, you're just having a laugh, or you're just making light of something which people close to you might understand and not have to respond to, somebody else may take that as permission, and it may lead to much more harmful behaviour from other men. And he said, when I started having that conversation, he goes, do you know what? He goes, I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And I could tell he's probably not going to say that again. He's probably going to be very mindful about the influence he has on other people. Because when we say those things and nobody responds, it gives you permission. It gives everybody else permission. So sometimes it's just letting people know, actually, are you aware that some people would actually be quite upset at that, or
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
some people might be hurt by what you're just saying. And most decent people will be horrified and go, oh my God, I didn't realise that. And then they'll change that behaviour, or they'll be more mindful. Obviously, those people that, don't change their attitudes and continue, they may require a different approach. But I think the good news is, given feedback in a way that's respectful, most people will respond positively. But we just need to start saying that and sending those messages, don't we?
Yeah, I think so. And I think also, there's also things, we'll have all been in situations, won't we, where something's not necessarily happened, but it's just like, oh, that didn't really sit right with me at the time, like it might not, perhaps didn't lead to an assault or anything like that, but actually just think, oh, what could I have done differently? And I think actually there's a lot of use in having those conversations with yourself as well, and then going, so what do I need to learn from this? What could I do differently? Looking up the information that you might need. So that's where things like the Consent Coalition are really, really good, because there's a wealth of information there as well, like things that you can use to help maybe gently challenge, or just think, oh, actually, yeah, this is maybe what I could have done differently. Or, and I think that is really worthwhile in itself to actually, not only just talk to your friends, but also talk to yourself.
And I think that some of the way that we work in the coalition is that sometimes people find it really hard, and especially when you say the word sometimes challenge or approach, because that kind of comes with that you having that confidence to do that. So some of the work that we do and the way that we communicate is about that thinking part. So it's, maybe you just do want to come away and have a little reflect and think, I could have done it differently, or I could have said something differently, or a lot of times like, oh, why didn't I? And I think it's through understanding how to do that you feel set in a way that's safe for you, and finding your space and finding your voice of how you want to do that. So I think recognising it can be difficult, but it's finding the way that's right for you.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about microaggressions, those little subtle things. In our training we talk about we can respond without even saying anything. Our facial expressions can, sort of a quizzical look or a shake of the head or a deep sigh can, indicate, hang on a minute, that's not right. So often we don't even have to say anything to actually show that something's not right or something's not appropriate. So just, in terms of the Consent Coalition, what's the core message? What is it that you're trying to communicate to people?
Talking about consent, understanding consent, and having, I suppose, a different type of approach. So we've created, as talked about some of the prevention work and some of the education work, but I think it's a very difficult conversation sometimes, particularly with young people. So we're trying to find new ways to connect. So we've produced and we've designed lots of different resources and some amazing campaigns. I think they're amazing, but I hope they're amazing. That are that are education on a different approach. So it might be that there are some maybe riskier things to talk about or uncomfortable things, like for instance in our A to Z of Consent campaign, which looks at every letter of the alphabet has a different message about consent.
Okay.
And we picked out words, this is going to test my memory now, but things like F for flirting, or B for banter, or I for intervene. And we picked out some of the words that we felt that we used most, or things that we needed to touch upon, especially through the pandemic time when everything kind of went online. And the response from that campaign has been phenomenal. And we really were quite shocked actually, because we launched that campaign and we worked with partners across Nottinghamshire. And if you haven't seen them, they're on the trams, they're on the buses.
I saw them on the trams.
And when we launched that campaign, I think everybody almost held their breath a little bit, just because we thought, what was the response going to be from the media, from members of the public, from young people? We were one of the first cities to put the topic of consent on such a large platform, and then we launched the campaign, and in that time we haven't had one complaint. And I'm very, very proud,
Yeah,
I think we're all proud of that statistic, because that statistic shows you that actually whether it's the messaging, it's how we're engaging, how we're connecting. For instance, that tram has done the distance of the circumference of the globe, I think, just one of the trams.
Wow.
So it kind of gives you an estimate of how far it's gone back and forth through Nottingham City, and how many people will have seen that and those messages. And the way that we realise that we're reaching people is because some of the stats that we can pull off. So our campaigns page on our coalition website has been viewed over 82,000 times. We have universities and colleges from all over the world contact us about, can we use this, can we share it. A personal story, my younger brother messaged me one day saying, I just wanted to send this photo, and it was the full A to Z up in their sixth form. And I was like, I have no idea how it's got there, but it's amazing that it's got from A to B, and it's been a wonderful way, particularly with younger people and students, because when we're doing engagement events, instead of maybe approaching students and young people about consent or sexual violence, often they'll say, I've seen your tram. And that is one of being the best way as a conversation starter. And then we might pick a letter, we might pick a particular subject, and that's how it's been used.
Yeah, it's like I bumped into a friend and we were talking about the A to Z of consent on the tram, and she went, K for kissing. A kiss is not a contract. And it was like, she said, it's such an amazing campaign. And it's just like, honestly, like people, like, I'd not seen her in 20 years, but she'd seen the tram, and she was like, I can't believe you've been involved with that. And it's just amazing to hear. And I've like, I do use public transport, quite regularly, and I've been sat like on a tram, and people have said, seen the campaign, or they've been on, they've seen the bus go by, and they've gone, that campaign's saving lives, that is, it's amazing. Or we've done stalls before, and we've seen people go by and go, it's an amazing job you're doing. And I think for us, from a sexual violence support service point of view, is when we've took the consent coalition material out with us, which we do on all of our stalls now, it is a real way for people to come in and have a conversation, because it's a safe way to come forward. And then you might get people disclose that something's happened to them, or ask if they, how they would get support or whatever. But it's just a safe way for people to kind of come forward as well. So there's been, that's been really helpful from our point of view as well.
And I think we didn't ever really anticipate where that campaign may go. And I think one of the really heartfelt moments that a charity in Sierra Leone about 1.5 years ago reached out to us and said, sexual violence, particularly among towards girls in our area that we work with, we've seen your campaign, could we use it? So we spoke with them and said, absolutely, feel free to download everything, or we can send it all to you. And they were holding some sort of awareness days where their staff came into the school, their volunteers and some parents. And they sent me some photos of at a table, and they were sat there and they were drawing out our letters, like N for no and Y for yes. And they were writing out our little messages, and they were then going to talk to their children and the young people in their schools about it. And when these photos came through, and I saw them on my laptop, and I just had to take a moment, and I sat back in my chair, and I think I got a bit emotional, because something that we created so locally here has now gone to another part of the world, and it's helping people talk about consent there, and it's being used for their young people and their volunteers. And it was a really special moment, and it's something that we'll cherish, and we hope that we can produce, keep going in some of the designs that we do. And on the basis of that one, we produced the nighttime A to Z consent campaign.
I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, what a legacy to have, like you say, something that was created locally, being used around the world, as it were. That's pretty amazing. So, I mean, where can people get a hold of these resources if somebody wants to get more information about consent and be able to sort of have some discussions themselves with family members or colleagues? Where can people get information from?
So the Consent Coalition has a website, so you could just type it into Google and you can find everything that we've ever produced on there. So that's our campaigns, that is our different types of resources, our booklet for survivors, information on where to go to access specialist support, or advice about whether we've already a child and go through a different referral pathway to get support. And so you can find it all on there, and we have a really active social media platform. So every day of the year there's a new message on consent. So we try to touch upon a lot of information and really relevant stuff that particularly young people will, I suppose, hopefully connect with. So everything you can find on the Consent Coalition website, and it's all free, and you can download it, you can use it, you can share it. We just ask people not to steal it. But it can be shared far and wide, and everything is you can use on your phone, so you can download it and share it with friends and family, and it's a really great way. And we've, I think, found that it's been a real source of information, and we're very, very lucky that we have over 30 partners that support that and those messages. So because of that, we can then share lots of our messages across a big, wider platform. But please feel free to use any of it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, a great sort of a bank for people that want to be allies, for people that want to start some of these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you'll see, say, on the trams and the buses and things, you might see a bit like, so I was behind the 28, I had flirting on this morning. I was like, yes, that's one of mine. So we have like, there are the kind of like A to Zs of consent, which have been seen on some of the billboards and that in town, haven't they? So it's got the full alphabet, but then each actual letter has its own poster which can be downloaded as well.
Wow,
so
okay.
like the KISS is not a contract, you don't have to do anything else. It's got a bit more information on it. You can download it to like a A4 size, or you can make it smaller if you want to. So that's available for all the letters of the alphabet, free of charge. But also we can ask us, you can contact us through the website for the social media packs that go along with it as well. So we've had a few requests for those, haven't we, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And people like to share on different platforms, so we make everything as accessible as possible, and our website has a Recite Me tool on it, so it's really good for access to all our different resources. And I think one of our biggest resources, as well as the consent campaign, is that we have a booklet called Your Journey, and it's for survivors who, whether they want to report or if they want to just access some specialist therapy, it's a booklet about your own journey and your options available in Nottinghamshire. And we created that together with our partners, and it has been an incredibly important resource. And it's one of the biggest ones that we have, and it talks about how to go to, whether it's not SVSS or it's our sexual assault referral centres, or what an ISFA might be, or what happens if you went to the police and reported. And some of those myths that we talked about, what will the police ask me? What happens in a video recorded interview, or will my phone get taken? So it answers some of those questions. We have specialist trained officers in Nottinghamshire that are trained to work and support with survivors, and then that pathway and that process between going into court. And there's a lot of worry and a lot of fear about what that process might mean, and hopefully that booklet, and we've worked with our wonderful colleagues at the CPS to talk about what that, and answer some of those questions and giving evidence and going to trial. But I think the main thing about that booklet, it is absolutely your choice what you would like to do. There is no pressure if you don't want to report, and there's no pressure if you don't want to seek counselling, but there are things available if you do want either of those. And that booklet has, I think it's been downloaded a fair few thousand times.
Yeah, it has,
and it's available in 6 languages. So we know that lots of members of our community find that incredibly helpful, that they can share it. And again, that's downloadable for free. And we know that our health services, our GPs are using them. They're getting shared across university campuses, and it's a wonderful resource for anybody to have. And I know there's been quite a few eyes nationally on that booklet. We've got some big plans, so maybe we'll do another podcast to watch this space where it might go. But it's been great to share it, and I think that other regions, other areas have looked at that booklet and thought, that's something quite special, and that's something really valuable. How have you done it? So we are, hopefully going to be reaching out to other areas in the East Midlands as to how we can support them with something similar.
So that's a great resource for anyone that's been directly affected, or anybody that knows somebody that's been directly affected in relation to being able to point them towards, like you say, specialist services that people might not be even aware of. So giving them the whole breadth of sort of support that's available, and advice, or where people can go, really.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's also giving people more of an informed choice, I think, as well, so they can be aware, obviously if you do decide to report to the police, that's one thing, but then actually, to be able to find out about the ISFA service that can support you through if a case goes to court, how you can ask for support while you're going through court, any measures that can be put in place to make that experience more easy for you. It's all kind of like those things that just make it easier for you to maybe make a decision about what you want to do, whether you do want to report or not. That information is there, but it's also done in a way that's really non-judgmental and really reassuring. So there's a section on some of the rape myths that might prevent a person from choosing to report or even ask for support. There's also there's little pull-out quotes, isn't there, that just say, for example, at the SARC, where you might have a forensic medical examination done, I think there's a pull-out quote that says, you won't be forced to do anything. You can stop or pause the process at any point. And those things are really important, particularly for somebody who has experienced sexual violence, for them to actually know that actually I am, even in this difficult time, I'm being given the choices, I can choose, I have control, and that's a really important thing to be able to give to survivors.
That's brilliant. So people listening to this that might not have known that much about the programme, how can people get involved? How can people help?
I think the best thing is just to contact us, drop us an email, and we'll get in contact and we'll have a chat with you about how you might like to help or support. And even if it's just sharing some of our messages, sharing some of our, some of our Instagram posts, or whether it's the booklet, or you're in a university and you think, actually my lecturer doesn't know anything about this. I think it'd be really good if they did, or my friends. So there's lots and lots of different ways. So it doesn't always have to mean the pressure, kind of the design work that we do, but it's about actually some of the way that we communicate with people and we can reach people.
I think it's really important to say that it's not just about teaching people about consent or getting people to talk about it, but also for as like a preventative point of view, but also it helps to educate us as well of the behaviours that we can expect. That actually we shouldn't feel targeted. If we've had alcohol, then that doesn't make us responsible for somebody else's choice to assault us. And so it kind of raises our expectations as well as people for the behaviours that we should be having, and the experiences that we should be having.
Brilliant. I guess the bigger picture is changing those social norms around those expectations of behaviour, isn't it? And like you say, being clearer that women are not responsible for physical attacks or sexual attacks that are perpetrated on them. I think the resources, I would encourage anybody to access them, even if they've not had any experience, or if don't know anybody, because it's, don't wait until something happens. Get the information, get yourself informed, so that you've got that. Because like you say, it's not just around sexual violence. Consent is a bigger issue, in different areas of our lives. So I think those resources can help in a whole range of different ways for people. So I'll certainly be getting onto the website and having a look.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say, thank you so much for your amazing work, and yes, I certainly look forward to seeing you again and finding out more about any new plans that you've got coming up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us and
Thank you for
sharing.
having us.